Okay, Chairman, we're now live and we can start the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and a very warm welcome to a virtual meeting of the Central and South Planning Committee of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This is a virtual meeting that is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell and I am the Chairman of this afternoon's meeting. We have some online housekeeping protocols to just quickly run through. I'm sure everybody on the meeting is well versed, but we will run through them anyway. And that is, can you please ensure that any mobile phones around you are kept on silence? That if you are wearing a headset, can you ensure the microphone is away from your mouth to avoid any noise? And please keep the microphone muted when not speaking and then unmute to speak. Only one person may speak at a time and I as chairman will call those to speak. That's the online housekeeping. We do need to do an attendance roll call just to show those watching on YouTube who is actually in attendance. So I'll call your name out if you could just confirm that you are here. And we'll start with the Vice Chairman this evening, or this afternoon rather, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. Yes, I'm present.
Good afternoon. Yes. Councillor Duncan, the Labour lead.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm present. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Good afternoon, Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. I am present.
Good afternoon, Councillor Bira.
Good afternoon, Chairman and everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Good. Councillor Brightman.
Good afternoon, Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Chamdale.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am present.
And Councillor Tubadar.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm present.
Good afternoon to you. And Councillor Dillon.
Last but not least, but good afternoon, everybody. I'm here.
Yes, good afternoon to you all. So, Liz, is that all members accounted for?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We need to do the same for officers as well. So I'd like to just confirm our planning officer this afternoon, Meg Harani.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm present, Chairman.
Thank you. Our head of planning, James Roger.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm also present, Chairman.
Thank you. Our transport officer this afternoon, Alan Tilley.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Our democratic services officer, Liz Penny.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. And our legal advisor this afternoon, Kerry Munro.
Good afternoon, everyone. Present, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Is that all officers accounted for?
It is, yes, Chairman.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, importantly, any councillor who does leave partway through the meeting will not be able to vote on the item that we're discussing. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor does leave the meeting partway through for loss of connection, put my teeth in, it's too early today, then I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorate, which we know is 3 councillors. Okay, we've now done the chairman's announcements and housekeeping and attendance, so I can now move on to the actual agenda for this afternoon. So we'll start with apologies for absence. Liz, have we got any?
No apologies this afternoon, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2 on the published agenda is to declarations of any interest for matters before this afternoon's meeting. Have we got any? I'm seeing lots of nods, so I don't think we've got any declarations of interest. Thank you. We can now move on to agenda item 3, which is to receive and agree the minutes of our last meeting, which was on the 7th of April. Can I take that we are in agreement with those minutes? Lots of thumbs up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on point 185, it does mention that I joined the meeting at this stage, but could we add that it was due to IT issues? I've never been late for a meeting in 7 years. I don't intend to have been written down as late on this one.
I'm sure Liz will build that into the official record of the meeting. And you were definitely there, Councillor Chamdale. Definitely there.
That's no problem. We can amend that, Councillor Chamdale.
Okay, so outside of that change, can we take that those minutes are agreed? Liz, okay, we can sign those off, which then leads us on to agenda item 4, which is matters notified in advance or urgent, which there aren't any. And agenda item 5 is to confirm public and private parts of this afternoon's meeting. Items 6 and 7, which we know are petition items, and we'll deal with those first in that order. And then we move on to agenda items 8, 9 and 10, which aren't petition items. And we have no part 2 items. So the entire meeting this afternoon is in public. Okay, right, that's the sort of preamble formalities. We can now actually go into the main body of this afternoon's agenda, which will go on to agenda item 6, which is number 2, DeSalis Road, Hillingdon. So, Meg, can I pass the baton over to you?
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application relating to 2 DeSalis Road, which is a 2-storey end of terrace dwelling. The proposal is to add a attached 2-storey, 2-bedroom dwelling to the site, and in many ways the application does comply with the council's requirements in terms of its overall design approach, the size or the height of the property, and its overall size meets the council's and the national standards. However, there are a number of issues that do arise. The siting of the property is well forward of the established building line. There is a staggered building line. There's a pattern of development along DeSalis Road, and this quite clearly disrupts that pattern, which will be evident when we look at the plans. And so for that reason, we're saying that it is unacceptable. Its width as well is it's not as wide as all of the other properties, and again there's a uniformity to the width and design of the properties, and this one will look odd in relation to the general street scene. So again, that is unacceptable. The issues relating to parking, generally we would require 2 spaces for the existing unit and 2 for the proposed. This proposes 1 for the proposed, and that may be acceptable, but if it was to be acceptable, then the applicant would need to provide evidence that on-street parking is available, and that hasn't been done. So the applicants have not demonstrated that parking is acceptable in the way that it's proposed. And finally, there are a number of trees located on the adjacent site, which is an open space belonging to the council, and they are substantial trees, and this would impact. It may well be that the development could be carried out without the trees being damaged, but because the trees are so close to the property, it's likely that the council would get pressure to remove those trees once we get residents into the new property, and because of the proximity of those trees to windows and the damage that they may cause to the new property. So for those 3 reasons, we are recommending refusal. If I can just go to the presentation. That's the site plan and the existing properties. If I can just, go back to the site plan, members will see that there's a pattern of development in this area of DeSalis Road, where you have a staggered relationship with the property next door, and that's repeated, and numbers 2 and 12 act as bookends to the other properties, and so they are set slightly forward of those properties. And when we get to the proposed development, you'll see that that pattern is disrupted quite substantially by the siting of the new property well forward of number 2 DeSalis Road. And members again will note the width of the property in relation to the width of the existing, and the way that would appear as very incongruous, again because it's a very prominent siting. That again, if I can just point out the trees that form part of the reason for refusal, and they are evident in these photographs, and you can see how close they are to the site, and the possibility that we would get requests for either the removal of the trees or very substantial works, which would in essence ruin the visual impact that they have. And so again, that's a reason for refusal. This is a present or part of the presentation, I think, for the petition or the agent, so we'll come to that later. But for the reasons that are outlined, 3 reasons set out in the report, we are recommending refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for taking us through that, Meg. Okay, I'm sure members would have taken on those points, but we've still got a bit of a way to go yet before we get into the debate. This is a petition item. So, Liz, what have we got? Have we got petitioners, applicants and ward councillors?
No, on this one we haven't. We have only got a representation from the agent for this one.
Okay, cool. Well, over to you then to take us through that.
Okay, thank you. So, as I say, this is from the agent who says, "Good afternoon, Chair and councillors. This written statement has been prepared in support of the planning application at number 2 DeSalis Road. The development proposal comprises the demolition of the single-storey side extension and garage on the southern side elevation of the property and replacement with a new end-of-terrace dwelling with associated amenity, cycle, refuse and parking provision. In assessing the application, the case officer has taken the view that the proposal is unacceptable for 3 reasons, namely external design, impact upon nearby trees and parking provision. For the benefit of members, we have sought to set out the reasons why we disagree with the case officer's assessment and why the application should be considered favourably. So the first point is external design. The eastern side of DeSalis Road, where the site is positioned, comprises a terrace of two-storey properties which retain a similar external appearance. As DeSalis Road turns in a southerly direction towards Uxbridge Road, the terrace displays a stepped and varied building line, which represents a visually interesting response to the sweeping curvature of the road. In terms of layout, the front projection of the new dwelling will be set forward of the existing building by 6 metres to respond positively to the unique flowing building line of terraced properties on the eastern side of DeSalis Road to the north, and to provide a visual termination point at the southern end of the terrace. This replicates the step approach which has been adopted at the northern end of the terrace. Please refer to figure 1 below, which demonstrates the unique nature of the existing building line and the considered approach which has influenced the layout of the new dwelling. Meg, sorry, would you mind just putting the presentation back up for us, and I can just point out what the agent's referring to. There we are. So that's the figure 1 that the agent's referring to there. So you can see he's put some commentary on there which you can read in relation to it. And then the agent goes on to say, the proposed dwelling has been carefully designed to ensure that its external appearance adopts features which are prevalent within the street scene, particularly in terms of its pitched roof design, external materials and fenestration detailing, and therefore responds positively to the visual character and appearance of the terrace and wider street scene. As demonstrated on the images below, which Meg will show us in just a second, the proposed dwelling will respond positively to the 2-storey scale and height of the adjoining neighbouring property and all other properties forming part of the wider terrace and street scene. Against this background, the development proposal represents a high-quality interpretation of the visual character and built form of the street scene. It therefore accords with local plan policy DMHB 11. So that first photograph that's up there now, it says there's a commentary saying visual impression of proposed dwelling within the context of the street scene facing north. Note how the scale and external appearance of the new house will harmonise with the neighbouring properties. And then the next slide, visual impression of proposed dwelling within the context of the street scene facing southeast. It also helps to demonstrate how the new dwelling will provide a termination point to the southern end of the terrace. Okay, thanks, Meg. And then the agent continues, impact upon trees. The applicant has submitted a professional tree report which demonstrates that it's possible to carry out the development without requiring the removal of any existing trees. The council's tree officer has reviewed the report and accepted this to be the case. Given that there are no windows on the proposed southern side elevation of the new dwelling, our view is that there will be no resulting pressure from occupiers to remove the trees in the future. Accordingly, our view is that it would be unreasonable to refuse the application on this basis. And finally, parking. The proposed layout demonstrates that space for 2 off-road car parking spaces will be retained within the front curtilage of number 2 de Salis Road, which is in accordance with relevant standards for a 3-bed property. In a similar manner, space will be provided within the front curtilage of the new 2-bed dwelling for a single parking space. This accords with the Council's parking standards and will ensure that there are no adverse impacts in terms of parking pressure or highway safety in the local area. Paragraph 109 of the NPPF states that development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. Against this background, we do not consider that there is reason to refuse the scheme on highway grounds. In conclusion, the applicant respectfully urges members to grant permission for the application. And that concludes all the written submissions on this item. Thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you, Liz, for reading that out, and thank you to the applicant for providing that statement for the members of this committee to consider. Okay, we haven't got any other statements to read out, so just to summarise before we go to the debate, we've heard from Meg, we've heard from the applicant, we have a recommendation for refusal with 3 refusal reasons listed against it. So, Councillor Chapman, you've indicated first. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think this is a good report, and I think it summarises it quite well. I can see what the applicant's trying to do, and I'll give them full credit for the, shall we say, imagination in trying to fit it into that area. I just genuinely think it's a bit too. Well, it's trying to squeeze something into too small a site, basically. I do think it's too close to the trees that are in Knight's Garden, which is a green flag park. I've got issues about parking, and also, although I take on board this idea of it's a staggered thing, it's a staggered digression of houses, so to speak. I think one of the applicant's actual one of his diagrams illustrates that effectively this building would be totally in front of the adjacent building, not sort of 50% in front, but almost like totally in front of it, so to speak. I can see what they're trying to do, but I think the officers have nicked the nail on the head. They've given 3 good reasons for refusal, and I propose, yeah, that's the one there. Thank you. And on that basis, I would propose that we go with officers' recommendation.
Okay, no, thank you, Councillor Chapman, and well anticipated, Meg, in putting the slide up there to illustrate the point that was being made. So let's go to Councillor Duncan, who indicated, followed by Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with what's been said. I think it's a good report. The other point I wanted to raise is when you look at the orientation of these buildings, on the staggered approach, the ones that do show quite a good distance in front of the adjoining property, they have south-facing walls. So in effect, that's not really overshadowing or having an adverse effect. When you look at this property at the end of the road, yes, it does project forward, and it projects forward a similar amount that the others do in setting back. But this will be north facing. And if we also look at the distance that it's coming out, and we take a 45-degree angle from the adjoining windows to habitable rooms, we can see that it impacts on those windows quite dramatically. So I think the orientation is also a consideration. And I would like to ask officers if there's something along those lines that could be included, because it definitely infringes our policies in relation to 2-storey extensions coming out and their effect on sunlight and daylight and the amenity standards on adjoining properties. And it just so happens that in this case that exacerbates it because it's north facing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Meg, is there anything you can come back on in terms of the orientation point that was made by Councillor Duncan there?
Yeah, there are windows on the front elevation. There's a habitable room window above the front door, which may be impacted on. So officers could look at just measuring the 45-degree angle, and obviously if it doesn't comply, then we can add a further reason relating to the impact on the existing property from the new one. It's just taking the angle and making sure that that is the case. So if we can have delegated authority to the head of planning for an additional reason if required, then we can cover that point, I think. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, are you okay with that?
Yes, I did look quickly and just put a paper on it, and it does appear to infringe it, which is why I raised it. So yes, happy to delegate that to officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon, you had your hand up earlier. I don't know if you still wanted to come back with anything.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think both those points have been made very well.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing anybody else indicated, but we're not seconded yet. Councillor Duncan?
I'll second. Sorry, Chair.
No, thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else indicate. So we are moved and we are seconded, and we have also got an additional point of delegating further refusal reason if required on the basis of 45-degree and orientation. So if we are moved and seconded, we can go to the vote. So Councillor Chapman, you moved. Councillor Duncan, you seconded. So it's Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Move with the officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Birra.
Thank you, Chairman. I go with the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Brightman.
Go with officers' recommendations along with delegated authority on the angle business.
Thank you. Councillor Chamdow.
Yeah, we go for officers' recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Tubadar.
For refusal, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Dillon.
For refusal, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I make that 8 out of 8 unanimous. Liz, for refusal with delegated authority to explore a further refusal reason for orientation.
Yep, that's agreed, Chairman.
Okay, so I can confirm this afternoon that agenda item 6 is refused. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We can now move swiftly on to agenda item 7, which is the second petition item of the afternoon. I have to keep remembering to say that, which is agenda item 7, 43 Sweetcroft Lane. So Meg, can I pass the baton over to you to take members and officers through this application, please?
Thank you, Chairman. In October 2019, planning permission was granted for various extensions to 43 Sweetcroft Lane, including the conversion of the roof space, raising of the ridge height, a number of dormers, and substantial changes to the roof. And that was accepted and approved. This application is a variation of condition 2, which requires the development to be carried out in accordance with the plans that were approved at that time. And in general, the variation doesn't change the size of the developments that have been approved, the design of the development in most cases, but it does include changes to the fenestration to the front and rear, and it is those changes that your officers consider to be unacceptable, and in terms of their appearance, and in terms of the impact on the Hillingdon Court Park area of special local character and the surrounding area. So we are recommending refusal on that basis. It's probably easier if we go directly to the presentation to have a look at the plans. So that's the site. It is, as can be seen from here, part of the Hillingdon Court Park area of special local character, and This was the original property, or sorry, these are the plans that are proposed, and it's these changes to the fenestration here, in particular, that are substantial alterations and which make it unacceptable. This is all glazing, and your officers consider that in terms of the character of the original property, as can be seen from these elevations, and in terms of what was originally approved, which was a smaller fenestration details with render and so on to the side. It's those changes which are unacceptable in design terms. So that is the reason why we are recommending refusal. And these are the photographs of the property. The works haven't commenced yet, and as can be seen from these photographs, the adjoining properties are 2-storey. So the works in terms of their size and scale are acceptable, but it's the design that we are recommending refusal for. If I can just request members if I can just request delegated authority from members to add, after the visual amenities of the street scene, the words the Hillingdon Court Park area of special local character and the surrounding area. Then I can the application is recommended for refusal if we can get the amendment agreed to the reason for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that, Meg. We'll pick up the rewording when we get to the debate a bit later on. So our petition item, Liz, what have we got to read out on this item?
So we've got a statement from the petitioner and also a short statement from Councillor Graham on this one.
Okay.
So I'll start with the petitioner statement, if I may. So the opening remark is, our petition submitted on the 16th of March by 35 Hillingdon residents comprised the neighbours' requested refusal, as we wished to maintain the character of the area and reduce the impact on residents. On 26th of April, we were provided with a copy of the council officer's report recommending refusal, as the proposals would detrimentally impact upon the character of the dwelling and the visual amenities of the surrounding area. Whilst welcoming this recommendation, we have a number of outstanding concerns given below. The first one is neighbour impact. The report states that it is not considered that the proposed changes would result in any adverse neighbour impacts. We believe this conclusion is flawed, given the substantial and widespread increase in bulk, height and fenestration. As detailed in our petition, the substantial and widespread increase in glazing has already resulted in a significant loss of privacy to neighbours. This is further exacerbated in the current application. The report does not give any reasons for the officer's conclusion that, on balance, it is not considered that the amendments would result in unacceptable overlooking impacts on neighbouring property. The second point is transparency. This lack of explanation mirrors previous applications where we are assured that all our objections were reviewed, but have not been able to see any backup for why they were rejected. During the last planning application, the neighbours made a joint submission on the 5th of January. The application was again approved, but in the officer's report, none of our concerns were directly addressed. We queried this with the Deputy Director of Planning, who informed us that the back office, in brackets the complete report, did consider fully all neighbour representations and comments. However, he has so far been unable to provide us with that report. We request the same for the current application. Our reason is to ensure transparency of decision making. Discrepancies. We were disappointed that the last application contained discrepancies between number of roof lights being described and the number being shown on drawings. Yet the application was approved without comment. The application now under consideration has a worse mismatch. The numbers of roof lights described in the written synopsis varies from the number on the drawings. and both are less than the number already constructed illegally on site. We seek clarification on how the Planning Committee intend to reconcile that which has been approved and what has been constructed without consent. Privacy. The main concern of neighbours is privacy. So far, the council has been understanding by insisting that all windows facing numbers 39 and 47 are obscured glass and non-opening below 1.8 metres from floor level. The owner has blatantly ignored this by installing all windows today in clear glass and fully openable. The current submission requests the obscured glass restriction is limited to the first floor only, with glazing to the second floor being clear glass. This is interesting because the architect is seeking a partial relaxation, and his client is already ignoring it totally in blatant disregard of the existing planning consent. We request that the existing planning consent is maintained and no relaxation is entertained. In addition, as the consents now allow for high-level clear unobscured glass to the north elevations at second floor level, this now compromises the privacy of neighbours to numbers 41, 45 and 45A. The petitioners request that the council insist that obscured glass should be mandatory on all the higher level elevations. Landscaping. We request the planning officers impose a landscaping obligation on the owner to replace the planting destroyed during construction and reinforce the planting to boundaries to reinstate the privacy previously enjoyed. Owner obligations. On every planning consent, a series of notes are added reminding the owner of their obligations regarding working hours, noise, site fires, etc. These are all routinely ignored. Work goes on till late Saturday. Radios are left on all weekend, even when the site is empty. Fires are a daily occurrence. As lockdown eases, can we request that site inspections are reimposed to control these repeated breaches of planning consents? Multiple applications. We feel that with multiple applications and the council's approval of ambiguous applications, it has encouraged the owner to pursue further retrospective applications. This is a blatant attempt to bulldoze through planning, especially whilst the pandemic may prevent planning officers making site visits to check what is actually being constructed on site. And that's the end of the petitioner's statement. We have a very short statement from Councillor Ray Graham, who is the ward councillor, who says Ward Councillor Ray Graham very much hopes that the committee will endorse the refusal decision for all the reasons given in the report. And that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that, Liz, and thank you to the petitioner for submitting their statement, and thank you to Councillor Graham for making his comments as well. Okay, got a bit to be discussing on this application. So, James Roger, I see you indicating.
Yeah, I think there's a few points it might help if I respond to. There was one error of Meg's from the presentation. I'm afraid I have to correct. Apologies, Meg. Work has started on site, and in effect, there is an ongoing enforcement investigation regarding possible breaches of planning control. Now, I can't comment further on that. And in fact, what we need to do is make a decision on the current application, because obviously that informs our position moving forward in terms of what we may or may not be enforcing against on site. In terms of which reasons officers think the application should be refused with respect to, I think the excessive amount of glazing means visual amenity is a straightforward refusal reason. The residents are alluding to a second reason relating to overlooking. I think it is explained in the report, though, why officers think that would be difficult to argue at appeal, and it's because basically the properties are more or less aligned with the same front and rear building line, so the glazing is facing effectively into the applicant's front and rear gardens. So like most houses, you'd expect to have first floor and ground floor windows looking into the front garden and the back garden. That applies before the approval. The previously approved scheme. What this scheme does is it introduces an excessive amount of glazing on the front and rear elevations. But the difficulty we feel is that the residents are already kind of overlooked to an extent by this property from the first floor front and rear windows. So is it materially more harmful in terms of loss of privacy from this extra glazing. And what we're saying on balance is we think that that would be difficult to argue at appeal, that we think the primary issue is that the excessive glazing is basically results in a very unattractive property, to be blunt, which we then feel will be harmful to the street scene and the Hillingdon Court Park area special local character. There is ongoing correspondence regarding other issues, but I don't think, without wishing to push them to one side, I don't think they're pertinent to your consideration of the current application. I think the key thing for you to consider as members is whether you think there should be a second refusal reason concerning overlooking or not. But hopefully I've given you a bit of guidance on that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you, James, and I do thank you for picking up points around construction without consent, and the fact is that unfortunately we're not here to debate that. That is a separate process which is being followed. We have to go with what is in the pack in front of us. So, okay, I'm sure members would have taken on those points, and the petitioners would have heard those if they're watching as well. Right, I've got Councillor Dillon who's had his hand up first. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a quick question, really. I'm aware of a property on Thornhill Drive in Ickenham that I've quite admired for a while. It's very similar to this in that it has in the roof a huge triangular window that is forward facing onto the road. Would something like that has already been approved, and I don't know how it's been approved, whether it's permitted development or not, but it looks in terms of scale, it looks very similar to what this is in the rear. I don't agree with what's going on in the front of this property, but for the rear, would that not set some sort of precedent, or is it because of the special local character that we are questioning this one?
I think I need to come in. The North Planning Committee recently considered an enforcement report concerning a property in Ickenham with a large triangular glazed feature. It may be the property you're speaking about. We're probably digressing quite a bit here.
Yeah.
But,
okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've got any overlap in terms of councillors, so it's really just me, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But yes, so there is an enforcement notice currently being served concerning a very large triangular glazed roof feature to a property in Ickenham, agreed by North Planning.
Okay, I think made the point there. I've got lots of hands being waved at me here, so I'm actually going to go to Kerry, who has indicated who might want to pick up a legal point here. Kerry.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to highlight that it's really important that we just focus on the merits of this application, because we could go into the perspectives of other applications, but the logistics and the details could be different. So it's just important that we focus on this one. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Kerry. I've got Councillor Duncan indicating, but I've also got Meg. So I'm going to ask Meg to just come in case there's a point that might be relevant to the debate. Meg?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It was just Councillor Dillon's point about Thornhill Road. Two issues. One is it may well be permitted development, and in this particular case it wasn't permitted development because the height of the ridge was being raised, and you're not allowed to do that without permission. Otherwise, the glazing, the dormer windows and so on could well be permitted development. And obviously the second issue, James pointed out that there are possible enforcement proceedings anyway, but it's possible that these things could be done under permitted development, and even on this property it was possible until the height of the ridge was raised. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back to 43 Sweetcroft Lane. I've got Councillor Duncan followed by Councillor Chapman. Councillor Duncan and Councillor Chamdale.
Thank you, Chairman. I was a bit concerned to hear that all the first floor level windows Oh, I don't know what's happened. I'm getting some feedback from somewhere. Sorry about that. But that they were all obscure glazed, and I thought that that was contrary to our policy. And I do think that if the ridge is being raised, we're not only overlooking from first floor level, but from second floor level, from both sides, as well as this extended glazing front and rear. So I don't know if that does mean that there's going to be more overlooking. I hear what the officers say about that, but really we're going to have it all the way round, aren't we? 360 degrees.
Okay, there's a bit of feedback from your microphone there, Councillor Duncan, but I can see James indicating.
Yeah, if I can just clarify the layout on the top floor. So what they've got is they've got bedrooms that have glazing that faces either into the front or rear gardens. So the bedrooms do not rely on dormer windows for their light or their outlook. And then the dormer windows serve these kind of separate rooms that come off the bedrooms that are sort of shower rooms or dressing rooms. So the dormers are kind of giving them a bit of extra space for non-habitable room facilities. And they're so small, those spaces, that they wouldn't be used as extra bedrooms or anything. They're quite clearly sort of dressing or shower stroke bath bathroom facilities. So that there isn't an issue with them compromising living space. We could condition them to be obscure glazed, and the approved scheme does have the dormer windows as obscure glazed. I think the key issue here for members, as said before, is whether they're concerned that the extra glazing at the front and rear causes an unacceptable overlooking issue. But as I said, officers think, and I didn't say before, that actually it's towards the centre of the site because of the sort of triangular roof feature, but also it's the aspect is to the down the front and rear gardens, whereas sometimes when we refuse overlooking, it's kind of more angled and directly facing a residence windows or rear patio area, which doesn't apply so much here. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And I think listening to those points, if members would give a feel for whether or not an additional condition it's something that this committee would want to look at. So, Councillor Chamdow, you indicated you've been very patient there.
Yeah,
sorry, Councillor Duncan, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I did. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say, yes, thank you for the explanation about the first floor plan, which I appreciate. Thank you for that. But it's this loft floor plan, which is now shown as having this extensive glazing. I don't think it's shown properly on the plan because it shows quite a small rear window on the drawings that we have, although there's a larger one at the front. But that will now be a huge area with windows, extensive glazing front and rear, as well as these roof lights as well. So it was at that level, at sort of second floor level almost, that I was thinking it's you're going to be able to see out from all angles, and that's what was concerning me. But anyway, it's something for other members to consider, but it did concern me, and I would like to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Chamdow, who I know has been very patient, so you're over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the overlooking, I think, thinking about, we had one in Macorba where the inspectorate basically ruled it, it wasn't overlooking, and it's massive, and you can see through 3 or 4 different gardens. So I think it's genuinely an on balance item there. I believe the reports were laid out pretty well, and I also would like to tell the petitioners, if they are having issues where rules have been broken, they can contact their local councillor who can take it up on their behalf, because rules are there to be followed, quite simply. I personally think there is an overlooking issue there, and I would attach that as an additional reason.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm kind of getting a few nods from across the members here that they would like a second condition added. James, Meg, is that something you can work on for us?
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just clarify something that Councillor Duncan raised. The property originally was a bungalow, so the roof works that are being carried out provide a first floor. There's no second floor proposed. So the windows would be first floor windows that look out to the front and the rear, and the dormer windows look out to the side. They were in the original permission that was granted condition to be obscure glazed. So there's no additional floor being provided over and above what has been approved, which is an additional floor above the bungalow, as it were. So this a ground and first floor. In essence, it becomes a two-storey property from a single story.
So sorry, Meg, there is a second floor. Sorry, sorry.
Yes, there is. There is.
Sorry, Meg. It's at this point I have to say that I know this proposal very well because I've been corresponding with local residents on it. So apologies, I'm interjecting, but there is definitely a second floor, and Councillor Duncan is right. There is a second floor. This is actually a change from the previous scheme, which didn't have that second floor, and it's part of the reason they're trying to get the extra glazing in so they can get light to this games room. In terms of the whether it can be an extra refusal reason, which I think is the question I've been asked, it is an on-balance issue, so it is one that if members feel that they wish it added, then I don't have a problem with it being added. Quite simply, the reason officers didn't have it as a second reason is you thought that would be more difficult to defend at appeal than the reason shown, which is the visual amenity one. But we could argue it, and we would argue simply because of the extent of glazing proposed, which is obviously far beyond that normally you would see on any form of extension to a residential property.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, James. I'm going to allow Councillor Duncan to come back on those points because I'm definitely getting a view that members here would like that second condition, second refusal reason added. Councillor Duncan?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Meg and James, for that. It was this second floor that I was concerned about. I understand that the first floor dormers are dressing rooms and bathrooms and things like that, so less overlooking there. But on this loft level, which is at the roof level, the second story, you've got extensive glazing front and rear, and also you've got roof lights on either side. That's why I was saying it's shown as a big open area, as I think it's a games room and a gym room, but really it's a massive area from which there could be potentially overlooking. So I would like to propose that we do add in that condition on overlooking. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
they've labelled it as a proposed loft floor plan instead of putting second floor. Very cunning plan.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Thank you, Councillor Chamdale. Right, we are moved on this one. I need.
Sorry, Chairman,
I would second that, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
If I could just maybe assist after all my mistakes. I'll try and assist members. Plan on page 89, which is a cross section, might be useful to look at just to show the heights that are being proposed and the windows that Councillor Duncan is particularly concerned with. So that's a cross section which shows, in essence, where the windows would be and the particular heights that may concern members. Page 89 on the plan pack.
Okay, thank you for that pointing out, Meg. Right, let's see if we can get ourselves back together again. Councillor Chapman, you indicated, followed by Councillor Chamdale.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think the proposal's been seconded yet, and I'm more than happy to second it if it hasn't been. Suffice to say, I would very much be supportive of an overlooking refusal reason as well. That's it, basically, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chandal?
Sorry, Chairman, I was just going to second it, that's all.
Oh, okay. Right, Councillor Duncan.
Yes, sorry to come back. It's the point, I did raise this. If we do look at the proposed loft floor plan in our plan book, it's page 88 in my plan book. I would just draw attention to the fact that at the rear, a very small window is indicated, and at the front, a larger one, but nothing like that shown on the elevations. So I'd like to point out what appears to me to be, you know, some difference between the plan and the elevations, please. And maybe that should go into an informative if officers wouldn't mind looking at that, please, as well.
Okay, I think we'll capture those points, Councillor Duncan, and make sure that's picked up. Okay. I'm not seeing anybody else indicated. We are moved and we are seconded, but before we go to the vote, let's just check what we're voting on. So we're going to delegate authority for a subtle rewording of the existing refusal reason, which is to include a reference to the area of special local character. And we are also delegating authority to work up a second refusal reason, which is going to be on the basis of overlooking. So we're moved, we're seconded.
And check the plan's accuracy, because it is the plans that we approved, Chairman. And
Yes,
so we need to have pointed out any inconsistencies, as it appears to us anyway. Thank you.
So the 3 points there. James Roger?
Sorry, before you vote, I agree with the informative. You may want to make this referable to yourself and the Labour lead, because it's, you know, there's quite a lot being agreed here in terms of changes from the report, and and obviously the residents have had some concerns about transparency, so it might actually be good if in this case we officers refer the extra refusal reason and informative to Chairman and Labour lead to sign off before we issue the actual decision notice, Chairman.
Yeah, that sounds very wise to me. Councillor Duncan, you okay with that?
Yes, Chairman, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, that was, I think we kind of got there, but Councillor Chamdale's now got his hand up.
Just kind of point that Councillor Duncan's making on the actual plans on 88. If you look at the proposed east elevation and the west elevation, you've got a small window next to the dormers. Is that window just been put in the wrong position? Because according to the proposed loft plan, you've got the 3 windows, and then it shows those windows either side, which means the plans are wrong.
I think there are some inconsistencies in the plans, Roy, as far as I can see anyway.
I agree with you, and I fully endorse that point, that if the plans are not accurate, we can't pass the plans.
Well, we're refusing them, hopefully.
Okay, some very good, healthy scrutiny of this particular item, but I think we're now at a point where members are satisfied that we've in a position where we can now cast our votes. So I will, with those amendments, delegated rewording reference to area special local character, delegated authority to work up the refusal reason, and obviously referring to myself and the Labour lead to ensure that the plans are accurate and it is what is in front of us. Okay, Councillor Chapman, you seconded the proposal. Councillor Duncan, you move. So that's Councillor Ahmed Walana.
For refusal, Mr. Chairman, with the delegated authority to the head of planning.
Thank you. Councillor Birra.
Thank you, Chairman. I go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Brightman.
Go with officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Chamdale.
Officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Tubadar.
For refusal, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Dillon.
With officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Liz, I'll make that unanimous 8 out of 8 for refusal. Can you confirm?
Yes, Chairman, that's confirmed.
Okay, agenda item 7 this afternoon is refused. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating in that discussion. We can now move on to agenda item 8. We've now finished the petition item, so we can go straight into the presentation. Meg, for agenda item 8, the Heinz Wolf building at Borough University.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application relating to the Heinz Wolf building. The application is before you because the site is in the Greenbelt. It is minor works to the building, mostly internal works. It does include the installation of new plant equipment around the exterior of the building, and that's probably evident mostly in the presentation. So if I go to that, it's probably easier just to look at the plans. So this is the site. It is in the middle of the Brunel University campus. And as you can see from that, it is in the Greenbelt. That's the building. And the existing and proposed ground floor works. There lower ground floor and first floor plans. And the roof plan. And some existing elevations. There is quite a lot of equipment on the building externally anyway, as can be seen from the various elements there. And this is additional equipment, I guess, that's being added. So as you can see, this is existing elements that are there, and then the green and the white area there are the new external service equipment that's being proposed. In terms of the scale of the building and the impact it has, it is fairly minimal given the location of the building in the middle of the campus. So as I say, it is mostly internal works. There are external works proposed, but those are the main visual ones that I pointed out, and in the context of the existing building and the existing equipment, we don't feel that it would have a major visual impact such that we could justify a refusal. So application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Meg. This is a site which all members and officers are very familiar with. We've got no petition, so we can go straight to the debate. And I've got Councillor Chamdow, followed by Councillor Duncan, Councillor Chapman and Councillor Ahmed Walana. So Councillor Chamdow.
Thank you, Chairman. Shouldn't spend too much time on this one. It is in the middle of the campus, and the changes are minor, so I would go for officer's recommendation.
No, thank you, Councillor Chamdow. Councillor Duncan?
I'd like to second, please, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman?
I was simply going to propose it or second it, and I've been beaten too, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Chairman, that's not a problem. The work will be externally done, internally done, and there is no visual impact actually greatly on the visual amenity. I'm happy to support the university and approve the application.
Okay. No, thank you. Right, I'm not seeing any other members indicate, so I think we can go straight to the vote on this one. So we'll start off with Councillor Chapman.
Go with officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, you seconded. Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Go with the officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Birra.
I go with officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Brightman.
Go with officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Chamdow moved. So that's Councillor Tubadar.
For approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Dillon.
For approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Liz, I'll make that unanimous 8 out of 8. Can you confirm?
Yes, Chairman, that's confirmed.
Thank you. Okay, I can confirm this afternoon that agenda item 8 has been approved. Thank you. Okay, moving swiftly on, we can head to the Harmondsworth landfill site in Harmondsworth Lane, agenda item 9. Meg, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an old landfill site which has been decommissioned, as it were, and obviously there are ongoing issues that need to be dealt with, including leachate and various gases that need to be dealt with. And so this is an application for the installation of a leachate pre-treatment plant and connection to the sewer at the site. It is sited next to an existing equipment building, which is larger than the one that's proposed. And in terms of its location, it is fairly well hidden. It is in the greenbelt, but it will be fairly well hidden from viewpoints or public viewpoints. And we don't feel that the visual impact and the impact on the openness of the greenbelt is such that refusal could be supported. If I go directly to the presentation, that's the site, and as you can see, sorry, if I can just point out, that is not the actual site. The site is further in from there, within the existing landfill site, and the existing equipment building is there, and that's the proposed. And the overall context you can see there, and this is the elevation. It will appear in terms of where it's set and so on, so that's the existing, and the proposal will be in this position here. There are substantial hedgerows along here, which screen the development from the main road. That's within the site and the existing equipment that's there, and that's looking at it from the main road, and as you can see, it is hidden from the views because of its siting. From the rear, there are these raised areas, these bunds that have been put in as part of the landscaping works for the landfill site. So again, it won't be visible from much of the green belt to the rear of the site. So we don't feel that it would have much of an impact on the openness of the green belt or a visual impact, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for taking us through that, Meg. Right, again, no petition, so we can go straight to the debate. Councillor Chamdow.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this. It's necessary. The only point I have to raise is on page 44, on number point 2. Development shall be removed as soon as reasonably practical. Never been a great fan of that. I would suggest we have a time limit on that. It's not a big bit of kit, so I would suggest something like 6 months. So once it's not needed, we should have some sort of time limit on it. And I would like to move the officer's recommendation. Chairman.
Thank you for that, Councillor Chamdow. Meg, is it possible to put a timescale as one of the conditions?
Yeah, I think that as Councillor Chamdow suggested, we could, rather than say reasonably practical, we could put in the wording which says within 6 months of the plant no longer being required, rather than having it as reasonably practicable. If members are happy with that wording, then we can amend that, delegated to the head of planning. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm getting a few nods from members on that, so I think that's probably accepted. Okay, Councillor Chapman, you got your hand up, or is that an old hand?
I'm a hold hand, Chairman. More than happy to second the proposal. Funnily enough, I was going to propose 6 months myself rather than the undetermined time limit. No arguments with this at all, really. The structure, such that it is going to be painted green. It's going to have green palisade fencing. Sad to admit that I do actually know the area, so I can confirm it's in the middle of not a lot of housing whatsoever. My only question, bear in mind, I've had to look at what leachate is exactly and what exactly a methane stripping plant does. 2 questions, actually. The methane, when it's stripped, the dissolved methane, so to speak, goes northwards to the existing plant. I was wondering what they actually do with it there. It's not a condition of my approving it, but I was just wondering, do they burn it off? Does it have to be removed by vehicle or anything like that? My only other question, which again is just more curiosity than anything else, the proposed drain, a pipeline, so to speak, to fit into the existing drain system about 300 yards to the west. I was just wondering, obviously that's included in this application. Would it be necessary to have an application if that was all the application was, so to speak? Does a drain pipe of this nature require planning permission in its own right, basically, Chairman?
Well, I'm going to throw that straight to either Meg or James to pick those points up, but I think Meg's eager to answer that one.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure I have the answer to either of those 2 questions. In terms of what happens to the methane gas, I'm not sure. It is covered by other regulations, so I'm not sure what happens to it once it leaves this site. In terms of the connection to the sewer, they may well, because it is engineering works, and they don't have permitted development rights as such, so I would think that they would require permission for any engineering and excavation works that are carried out in connection with the laying of pipes and so on here.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Meg. I can see Councillor Chapman thumbs up. I've got Kerry, who's indicated, our legal advisor.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry. Okay, thank you, Chairman. I've just got 2 points because I note that the development is proposed in the Greenbelt, and looking at the officer's report under the Greenbelt considerations, the main considerations, the very exceptional circumstances test hasn't been implemented in there. And it's not to say that the development cannot be conducted, it's just that that test is pivotal for Greenbelt, and reasons why we're departing from the very exceptional circumstances need to be set out. Secondly, I know that there's a section 106 proposed, and with the parking restrictions, that's why we're having this section 106, I can see. Because there's no financial contributions, we cannot seek the project monitoring fee of 5%, so that would need to be taken out if members are satisfied that this officer's report could be approved.
Okay, Meg, can you pick up the point Kerry's raised on the Greenbelt, or James?
I think the second paragraph in the summary does consider why the development is not considered inappropriate and therefore doesn't require the very exceptional test to be brought forward, as it were. So we don't consider that it is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt because it supports the wider landfill operation that has previously been sort of approved. There is no 106 proposed in this particular case, so I'm not sure where what our legal officer is referring to in this case.
I think that's the next application, isn't it?
Oh.
Okay, Kerry, you okay with that Greenbelt explanation?
Sorry. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Cool. No, good to test these things, to be absolutely sure. So thank you for that. Right, we are moved and we are seconded. I'm not seeing any other members indicate, so we can go to the vote on this one. Councillor Chapman, you seconded. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, go with officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Go with the officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bira.
I'll go with officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Brightman.
Go with officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Chamdow moved. Councillor Tubadar.
For approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Dillon.
For approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Right, Liz, I'll make that 8 out of 8. Approval?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. So I can confirm agenda item 9 this afternoon is approved. Thank you. Right, this brings us to the last item on this afternoon's agenda, which is agenda item 10, 163 High Street, Useley. Meg, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application which relates to 163 High Street, Useley. Members may recall some time back that we had an application to add 2 stories to this building, which was eventually refused and went to appeal, and the appeal was dismissed, and that appeal is considered in the report when looking at this particular application. This is an application to add a further single story on top of the existing building to provide 5 further flats. The property already has prior approval to be converted into residential properties, and therefore it's an additional 5 flats to what is being proposed. It is the subject of a section 106 which takes away residents' right to apply for parking permits. And if I could just address what my colleague was referring to previously, which is the monitoring fee. It is a difficult one because it does require monitoring in the way that we need to check whether when we get applications for parking permits, they need to be referred to the planning service to see whether there is a section 106 covering or conditions covering the requirement, and it is that monitoring that that it's in there for. But sometimes we do take it out and we leave it to members in this particular case to decide, I think. In terms of the actual application, the building is a standalone building. It is surrounded by commercial and residential buildings, but the impact of the additional story we feel would not have a major impact on adjoining occupiers or on the visual amenity, and that is borne out by the views of the previous inspector, who felt that whilst 2 additional stories was not acceptable, he did indicate, not directly but in the way that he worded his decision, that a further additional story may be acceptable if the materials were correct and if the design was acceptable, which was the issue with the previous application. So the design in this particular case we feel is acceptable. It has no impact on adjoining occupiers, and therefore we have recommended it for approval. If I can go to the presentation. So that's the site. There's a car park in this position for commercial building, and then these are residential buildings to site. There are some listed buildings opposite the site, and this is the existing lower ground floor with some parking in there, and these are the plans which show the approved or the prior approval that was granted to the site. So these are not changing in any way in terms of their layout. So this is the existing elevations, and then so there are amendments to the basement to provide cycle parking and storage areas, as well as parking, and as I say, the upper ground and first floor plans don't change. The second floor does, or is a new addition, and the top floor. So we've got the materials that are being proposed are similar to the previous application, and the inspector felt that those materials in themselves are acceptable. It was a size and scale and design that was previously unacceptable, and in this particular case an additional storey is considered acceptable. As I say, it is a standalone building. There are higher buildings adjoining the site. This is looking at it from the car parking area, and so in essence it appears as a sort of two and a half story building currently, and if I can just go back to the photograph here, you'll see that adjoining you've got three and a half, 4-story buildings. So in terms, and again you've got 3-story buildings across the road. So in terms of its scale, it fits in reasonably well with what's around it. So we do consider that they've overcome the previous reasons for refusal, and it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that, Meg. I do recall this one coming before this committee a while back, actually. So we've got no petition items on this, so we can go straight to the debate, and I can see Councillor Ahmed Walana is first to have his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was always against the developments and overdevelopments and usually, but I think this one, if it had 2 stories, application for 2 story, then I would not be happy. But I'm okay with the one. I think it will contribute to good size of the homes, providing homes and dealing with the homelessness. And of course, usually has been wonderful in terms of having a great buildings and flats and developments. But this one is okay. I believe that there would not be parking issue as such, because they have quite decent car park as well. So I would like to move.
You're moving officer's recommendation, Councillor, yeah?
Yes, Chairman, I do.
Okay. No, thank you for your comments there. I've got Councillor Duncan who's indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. I do want to second this, because I think that we're not in a position to really refuse it, bearing in mind that the 2 stories were refused, that there's higher buildings, the Continental building, it will put it on equivalent terms. However, I do have concerns about our standards, because this was the old housing office, council housing office for Useley West Drayton, and so it was converted under prior approval. We didn't have any say in that. So the only parking is what there is in the basement or the lower ground, and some of that is now going to be lost. And the car park next door is the car park for Aldi, which is the commercial property that was referred to by Meg in his presentation. I don't know if residents are able to come to some agreement with Aldi about renting some of those spaces for themselves. But really, there isn't really sufficient parking in that area. It's right on the busiest corner as you enter, usually, and the road at the side, Trout Road, is quite narrow, and there's very limited parking there. So I think there may be parking difficulties, but I wanted to ask also about the amenity space, because no amenity space, of course, was provided before under prior approval because it didn't have to be. But the amenity space that's provided now on the roof, it does seem a little bit close to the boundaries. And we've always said that, certainly on the side, we've always said that this should be set back so that if there were people on the roof who wanted to throw things off or, you know, behave in an antisocial way, they couldn't do that. So I would just like some reassurance that there's going to be some kind of protective treatment around that, that if there are people who do want to behave in an antisocial behavioural way, and we have had one or two incidents, I know, that we're going to have sufficient control to protect people from that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Meg, a couple of points there. One is concerns over parking, and the second point there is you know, assurances that the amenity space on the roof has a setback. Can you pick those up, Meg?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In terms of the parking, obviously, it is a difficult one because we don't have any control over the prior approval and the residents that go in there, and therefore we can't say to those residents that they can't apply. So we can only apply the Section 106 to this particular application and the residents that go in here. So it is a difficult one. It does, the lower ground floor does involve the loss of some spaces, but I would say that some of those spaces that are indicated on the plans don't work particularly well. They're difficult to manoeuvre in and out of anyway. So I think that overall there's not a big loss of parking spaces or usable parking spaces, and we've tried to control it as best we can with the proposed 106. In terms of the amenity space, generally we do ask for details of barriers, if you like, treatment to those spaces, and I was looking for the condition that normally required that, and I thought it was on this particular application, but I don't see it. So if I can ask members permission to put that on, then we can deal with that element with the additional condition. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Meg. Councillor Duncan, are you okay with that?
Yes, I'd like to second it with that additional condition then, please.
Okay, I've got that. Thank you. Councillor Chamdell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is the parking thing. This is bothering me, whether I understand it correctly. So the existing is 17 residential apartments, 15 car parking spaces. Now we're going to have 22 apartments and we've got 10 spaces. So for me, that's a considerable drop. That's a 33% drop. Whether you can maneuver in and out, that doesn't show on here. If that's the case, it should be shown on here that actually these are not real spaces, but we're going by the plans. So, and it does say, then on page 72, transport statement says that the car parking is underutilized, and yet these additional flats should be car free. So that has no relevance. That statement has no relevance with it, because if these 5 flats are car free, they don't need to park any car parking spaces. They won't be given any car parking spaces. So if you could give them some clarity from the officers, please. Is that correct in my reading? 17 apartments, 15 spaces, 22 apartments, 10 spaces, please.
Thank you, Councillor Chamdale. Alan Tilley, you've got your hand up there.
Thank you very much,
Very
Chairman.
much
Thank you.
transport issue, so over to you.
Yes, it is correct that there will be 22 units and 10 car parking spaces. So that's a ratio of just under 0.5 for the total number of units. There will be a car parking allocation plan. Now, we know Useley Town Centre, the development's quite close to the Tesco's. It's got a PTAL score of 3. And there is, of course, a Section 106 that prohibits people from joining any nearby parking management scheme. So on that basis, we feel that the development can work with the number of car parking spaces proposed. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for picking that up, Alan. Councillor Chamdale, did you want to come back?
Doesn't work for me. Doesn't work for me. It does not make sense whatsoever. 17 apartments, 15 spaces. We've still got those 17 apartments. Well, now we've got 10 spaces. Forget about the 5. For those existing 17 apartments, we're now reducing 33%. So that means either it was over provided for originally, or it's just make believe. It's just a number thrown out, and there we go.
I think reading the report, talking about it might have been over provided initially. But Alan, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, the applicant tells us that the car parking is underutilised, and well, because we've got the Section 106 that prohibits people from obtaining a car parking space, they won't be able to park nearby, so it will be self-enforcing. And then again, as I've mentioned, you've got good access to local facilities, Crossrail, and a PTAL score of 3.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Alan. I've got Councillor Chapman, who's indicated now as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I must admit my only misgiving of this with the scheme is the parking. I am conscious that we used to have a 1-to-1 in terms of parking to flats, and now it's slightly less than 0.5. I suspect if we looked at this as a totally new application, though, slightly less than 0.5 would still be considered acceptable. Also bearing in mind the PTAL and Crossrail, etc. I think if we try and look at it as an opportunity to look at a building that's currently under permitted development, so what the old-fashioned term for permitted development was, we're effectively trying to regularise this and bring it back into planning, so to speak. And on that basis, well, I won't say I'm more than happy to support it, but I'm comfortable supporting it, shall we say. Thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you for that, Councillor Chapman. James Roger, I think you got your hand up.
Yeah, it was just a small point. I do know this building because it's had a long planning history, because obviously the prior approvals flats have been there for quite some years now, and there is very little use of that car park. In effect, the existing occupiers, not many of them have cars, it would seem. So were this to be refused on parking and go to an appeal, I think one of the first things the inspector would see is that there's very little usage by the 17 flats of the existing car parking, and therefore they'd probably then take the view that the extra 5 flats isn't something that causes them undue concern. That may be a slightly different way of looking at things than we do sometimes, but it is just, I just happen to know that there isn't an existing parking problem. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you for that, James. I'm not seeing any other indications, so I think we can go to the vote as we are moved and seconded, although we've got a slight delegated rewording to be picked up. Yeah, so Councillor Chapman.
Go with officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, you seconded. Councillor Ahmed Walana, you moved. Councillor Birra.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll go with officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Brightman.
Go with officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Chamdale.
Officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Tubadar.
For approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Dillon.
And move with officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, Liz, I'll make that unanimous 8 out of 8 for approving this application.
That's correct, Chairman.
Okay,
Sorry.
I can confirm agenda item 10 is approved this evening.
Sorry, Chairman, it's just to confirm that it's an additional condition relating to the screening or barrier
Correct.
around the amenity space. Yeah, delegated to the head of planning.
I can't even read my own handwriting. That's exactly what it says here. Now you confirm that. So yeah, we've got that additional condition delegated.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, well, that was an interesting debate as well. So that brings us to the end of this afternoon's meeting. Well, it's now this evening's meeting, near enough. And I'd like to wish everybody that's been watching us on YouTube, thank you very much for watching us, and thanking members and officers for participating in some very good scrutiny this afternoon. But on that note, we will now close down the YouTube channel. Thank you, Liz.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Just
Thank
bear with me
you.
one moment. I'll
Goodbye.
stop the streaming. Thank you.